Have you ever had your TikTok taken for a news article on a website, screenshots taken, your words taken, maybe taken out of context? Let's talk to everybody's favorite IP and entertainment lawyer, Tony, to find out more about what you can do if your TikToks are being used without your knowledge or consent.
My name is Tony Lee Costas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School and have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Something we see a lot come up is a TikTok or an Instagram going viral and getting the attention of some of these news or news adjacent websites who then take those TikToks, spin them in some way. They'll use screenshots, they'll have conversations, and they'll write articles on the stories that people are telling inside of these TikToks. And a lot of times they have weird spins to them, and the people who are the subjects of those TikToks and that story may not love it, or maybe they do. So when it comes to this, Tony, what do we need to know as creators about protecting our property and making sure that we are making the right steps forward if we are not loving what's being said about us?
Yeah, this is definitely much a very real problem in the news industry, and I'm going to kind of lump it in that broad of a category because oftentimes the scenario that you're talking about happens with certain websites or publications that like to dub themselves as news, but they may talk about newsworthy stories, but they're more well known of being more like tabloid oriented type of websites. So I think first and foremost, it's relative to each person and their own interpretation of what they consider news. Are you more of a hard news person like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Time Magazine, those types of publications? Or do you really look at all publications as news? Because I think that that's relative to each person. Now, that said, tabloid websites are very much known to take these viral videos on TikTok, on Instagram, wherever they may be, and they do the screenshots, they throw them up as the photos, and then they'll write up basically an entirely drawn out, regurgitated version of the video. This is, ladies and gentlemen, the classic case of the used and abused form that copyright fair use comes in. Copyright fair use, we've talked about before in previous videos, so you can check them all out in the playlist, I'm sure. But fair use operates as a defense to copyright infringement so long as, that's the operative words there, so long as you are using that person's copyrighted work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. And as you can see, two of the enumerated reasons that are laid out under copyright fair use are what likely these tabloid websites are going to use in their back pocket. The whole commentary aspect of it, maybe even a little bit of criticism, but certainly the news reporting angle, especially because the whole argument for them using this video or talking about this video on their website is, oh, it got a lot of buzz. A lot of people are talking about it on social media. That makes it newsworthy in and of itself. But does it really? That's the thing. And I think that's unfortunately the problem with copyright fair use. It is truly subjective. Some people will assess copyright fair use on their own basis of opinion, but others may say that there are other factors, there are other considerations that essentially weaken or even strengthen the fair use argument. And that is crucial to the whole analysis. That's why even the decision that went down very recently with Andy Warhol and the Andy Warhol Foundation and Lynn Goldsmith, Supreme Court decision that was split 7-2 that ruled that that the Prince series that Andy Warhol made was not copyright fair use. That's why a case like that is so pivotal to the landscape of copyright fair use, because it does lay out certain considerations of what is or isn't fair use, what makes something transformative versus not transformative. Is taking a screenshot or several screenshots of someone's video and slapping it on a website, tabloid website, is that really transformative behavior in full effect? I think that the Lynn Goldsmith case, the Supreme Court case on the Andy Warhol case, really was very narrow in scope and kind of laying out copyright fair use, really just more so assessing transformative fair use, but it does raise these bigger questions that I'm sure we're going to see in future case law. So all that to say, I think that when you're the victim of these types of tabloid stories, bear in mind that these websites are trying to milk to death copyright fair use, and that's what they're going to come at you if you were to email them and say, hey, you took my video, and they'll say copyright fair use, and then they'll milk it to death. But then at that point, it's relative to each person to make to decide for themselves if it's a justified argument for sure.
So at that point, if we choose to let it go, it is what it is. If we choose to fight against it, what steps might we take?
So I would say first things first is to talk to a lawyer with expertise in this field, especially if they've dealt with news media organizations and unauthorized licensing of material, or just generally speaking, the legal landscape of using someone else's content in news in a news capacity. That could even get to the heart of whether or not the use of your content, or maybe the explanation of the circumstances that led to this tabloid website using your video, may even be defamatory in nature. Now, I want to caution viewers, defamation is a very serious allegation to make. And defamation is no joke, especially when it comes to laying out all the factors that go into whether or not something qualifies as defamatory behavior. Because it's not just saying that someone said something false, it's that the other person or the other entity knew that the statement was false and still made that statement anyway. That is the heart of defamation. So a lawyer would help kind of assess all those factors. Did the tabloid website engage defamatory behavior? Nine times out of 10, it's not going to happen. So then we get into the other aspect of it, which is, the ethics of news storytelling, the ethics of using someone else's video and just grabbing screenshotting the heck out of it and throwing it up on a website. A lawyer will help give that guidance in terms of what could be the recourse. It could be a cease and desist. It could be an email asking for, or a phone call asking for a conference call, trying to lay out what happened, gathering as much information as possible. And, maybe at some point, if it needs to come to that level, maybe there would be some ask for a takedown, maybe even an ask for a license fee if they in fact used enough or maybe all of your content, your video, in such a way that it falls outside the parameters of copyright fair use and is inherently an infringement. And if that's the case, then you want to make sure that even before you're bringing an allegation of copyright infringement, that you have your video registered in the U.S. Copyright Office, because the only way any claim of copyright infringement will stand a day in court is if that work was registered in the U.S. Copyright Office fully with a registration number. Once you have that, then you can bring that claim forward. But working with a lawyer is going to be the most important part of this process, helping them navigate through the whole process, gathering all the details, sharing it with them, will help the lawyer then create the necessary game plan to get an action plan going and get something underway.
In terms of registering that copyright, how long do we have to do that? I know we've discussed this before, but just highlight that for us.
I would say it depends on how backed up the U.S. Copyright Office is. If it's a fairly trouble-free type of video where you don't have any extra third-party material, it's the kind of thing where we're talking maybe a month to 2 months, maybe 3 months max. It's an extremely short process. It is not long whatsoever. I would say the only time it gets long is if you do have third-party material in your content and you fail to disclaim that wasn't your content when you're filing your registration application. So I would say that might extend it maybe a month or two more, but I have never seen it any more than a month or rather more than 3 months. It's usually been an average of 1 month to 3 months.
And let's say you don't register each and every TikTok that you're putting out into the world, because that can definitely add up and be a lot of work for you. But something like this does happen. Do we have the ability to then go and register it, or is it too late?
You can register it anytime you want. The whole trick with copyright infringement is that if you observe that your work was infringed on by someone else, you basically have 3 days from a date of notice to basically notice of infringement to pursue a copyright infringement claim against the infringer. The only thing, though, is that if you register the work after date of discovery, then what happens is you probably are only going to get statutory damages for the infringement. You're not really going to get anything beyond that, like, any sort of extra compensatory damages that could be afforded to you. But still, each claim can add up to $150,000 by law. So, I mean, that's a pretty good payday. But, it's the kind of thing to consider when you are making content. If you know that you could expect an infringement in the future, or if you've been a victim of copyright infringement periodically by other people, I would say that it should become commonplace practice to just get your work registered in the U.S. Copyright Office. And then at that point, you're just waiting in the wings for someone to infringe on your work. You can act on it, and you've already gotten that registration number fully enforced, registered in the U.S. Copyright Office, and you don't have to lift a finger anymore.
And because I know this question is going to show up in our comments, let's talk about what we can do to proactively prevent people from taking our content and using them on some of these news or news adjacent websites. Do we have the ability to say, do not use my content, and have that protect us?
I mean, there is a world where I've seen it where there are people that say for licensing inquiries, contact, and then they insert either their contact information or maybe they would have an agency that works on their behalf to license their content. So actually, a perfect example of this, a day or two ago, we had the crane crash here in New York in Hell's Kitchen. A massive crane fell. One person out of all of New York. It's crazy to think also how we live in a city, at least I live in the city, where there are millions of people that commute the streets, and there was one person that was at the right place and right time, and not only captured the crane falling, crashing into the building, but capturing its collapse onto the street level. All that to say, that person has the money shot. I am sure that there is a world where he got flooded with so many inquiries that he at some point had to hand the keys over to an agency that is now handling all the licensing on his behalf. So that kind of thing, that kind of disclosure of licensing inquiries could be made as simply as in the caption of the video. That is something that is very commonplace. Or even if it's silent on that, it would be expected or understood that a news agency would contact the uploader of that content via direct message or by other means of communication and say, hey, I work at such and such news organization. Can we use your content in our news program? And then they lay out the parameters. And it's at that point that the licensor, the person that owns that copyrighted material and is being asked to license out their material, it would be at that point that the licensor would say, yes, but it comes with a price tag. And they would disclose the license fee that would likely come with the use of that specific material.
So if you've got questions on this, if this has happened to you, if you're worried about this happening to you, go ahead and drop your comments down below. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes as we continue to help keep you legally protected in the entrepreneurial space. We know that these things are becoming more and more prevalent inside of our society as more and more content is being created. So anytime you've got a question, now is the time to drop those. Tony's coming back. But as always, you can reach out to Tony on his social medias as well for in-the-moment conversation with him. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at The IP Professor. And you can check out my entertainment law podcast called Unseen. New episodes drop every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Follow along for more tips and tricks on how you can navigate the legal side of entrepreneurship. Tony's coming back for upcoming episodes, so drop your questions now. And make sure you follow along as we help you navigate the world of social media marketing, growing your online business, and making this your most profitable year ever. We'll see you in the next episode.